Let's go to Hebrews 12 and 25 through 29. Let's read that together. See that ye refuse not him that speaketh, for if they escape not who refuse him that spake on earth, much more shall not we escape, if we turn away from him that speaketh from heaven. Whose voice then shook the earth? But now he hath promised, saying, Yet once more I shake not the earth only, but also heaven. And this word, yet once more, signifieth the removing of those things that are shaken, as of things that are made, that those things which cannot be shaken may remain. Wherefore we, receiving a kingdom which cannot be moved, let us have grace whereby we may serve God acceptably with reverence and godly fear. For our God is a all-consuming fire. And that is Hebrews 12. Amen. So there's, of course, many things we can talk about here, but I want to move today a little slower. I've been enjoying the lectures by a professor out of Toronto, professor of psychology. His name is Jordan Peterson. I'm sure some of you guys have heard of him. But it's amazing how scholarship has changed when regarding the Bible and or Christian civilization. It's amazing. 10 years ago, 20 years ago, when you heard any scholar talking about Christianity or religion, they would poo-poo it. They would think it's a joke. They just think it's like, mythology, and it's, just, okay, nice poetry. But now you have 25% of the scientific community that now says they're a theist. That is a huge change from the 1980s, when about 99% of the, quote, scientific community was atheist. Okay? So you have a massive change even in the, quote, scientific community, right? Where now all the evidence is pointing towards an intelligent mind. We talk about it all the time, which is immaterial or beyond time, beyond space, which is beyond time or eternal, which has incredible knowledge because all the mathematics, constants, conditions that hold the universe together with all the fine tuning was put there not by random, but are all connected, such as the mass of the electron, proton, you name it, changed by a little bit and it's gone. The whole universe collapses. So the more scientists are studying into the reality of the universe, the more it's confirming that there is an intelligent mind that is behind. So we know that the whole universe, of course, and we know now the whole communities that are based in objectivity or materialism, that are trying to look at the objective universe, try to find evidence of why it exists, etc., are not, even they are forced now to look at the reality. They're forced to admit that their scientific arrogance in the 80s and 90s and their atheistic surety is not as solid as they thought. So now you have people like Jordan Peterson, Professor Emeritus out of Toronto University, now talking. I mean, they're just praising Christianity. It's like incredible. They say they're not Christian. Just like who was the famous atheist who said that he railed against Christianity his whole life and then he became Christian at the end of his life? Conveniently, right before he left. Who was that? It was the father of atheism, one of the fathers of atheism. Major figure. Just somebody can Google that. I bet you can find it right away. I can't. No, not Bertrand. It was a famous atheist philosopher who right before he passed said, "You know what? I believe in God." And then the whole atheist community came after him saying, you traitor, how dare you. Flu, that was a flu. One of the real, pillars of the atheistic philosophical world, okay? But you see this now in academia. You see so much more respect for Christianity. It's incredible. It is incredible. And I highly recommend looking at Jordan Peterson's biblical series. It's a very fascinating psychological, take on the biblical. Now, I'm not saying, he's not a believer. He doesn't, but he believes, he sees how incredible the Bible is. He sees how incredible the Bible is. He explains it almost like the internet. The Bible, he says, is close to the internet because it's a text which is hyperlinked together. He made a graph which has all these arcs, all these like billions of arcs that are, all these different colors. And it shows how the Bible is actually linked and hyperlinked together. So it's like the internet, and then each word is linked to other words, And, each concept is linked to all these different concepts. They just don't have the hyperlinks, that you can click on. But the Bible itself is so interconnected. And he says when he looks at it and he shows the actual graph, it looks like a piece of art. Just those hyperlinks, how it's connected. Okay? But beyond that, he's taking a very critical approach to how the proponents of the historical critical method at Harvard, that's how we're trained in it, and it just skepticism, basically a mocking skepticism of religion in general and particularly Christianity in specific. So you see this whole power structure that's been lying to us and indoctrinating us really with creating the atmosphere for real Satanism to flourish. Whether or not they're aware of actual Satanism, whether or not they actually believe in an actual metaphysical Satan, or whether or not they believe this sort of atheistic Satanism, doesn't matter. They're creating the environment, the political environment in which Satanism can actually flourish. Okay, you're talking about killing babies, 54 million babies, and abortion, culture, and et cetera, et cetera. They call it women's health services, but you can't get a mammogram there. You can't get an ultrasound there. You can get killing babies there. That's what you get. So you have all these different things that actually incorporate the culture of what Satanists actually want, actual Satanists who, actually do human sacrifice, who actually want to do baby killings, and historically have done those things. Creating the environment for more deviant forms of sexuality, homosexual political agenda, transgender political agenda, confusion of the gender dysphoria on a mass scale, saying that there's no biology exists anymore, and then our gender is just how we feel. I mean, you hear me ranting about this every day. Every day you hear me ranting about this, right? So I'm not going to rant about it today, even though I have just a little bit, okay? I'm not going to go on like this the whole day. But this is a scenario where we're existing in, okay? And then, of course, that's the context of where Godism comes into play and why Godism is so important, because it's the opposite. Godism is not allowing the culture and the civilization and the atmosphere in which actual Satanism can exist. And it is, of course, a culture of freedom and sovereignty and responsibility and loving God and loving your neighbor. And that's why all the peace ninjas we're training, because we train so that we can love God and love our neighbor, right? So that we can be sheepdog that protect the sheep from wolves and predators, etc. So this kind of culture, and of course the Constitution is a representation of that, is the real battle that's happening on the cosmic level. Okay, so we're talking about all these things in verse 27, where these things are being shaken, but of course we receive a kingdom which cannot be moved. It's an unmovable kingdom. It's not because it's only a kingdom in the mind, or it's only a kingdom in the mental space, or cognitive space, or psychology, or in the spirit. This is a kingdom that in the end of time, will actually be on earth. And that's what every Christian, if you're a Christian, you have to believe that. You have to believe that Jesus is going to return, that he will establish his kingdom, and he will rule the world with the iron rod. You have to. You as a Christian, you actually can't believe in democracy because the Bible is very clear that the king of kings is going to return, and there's going to be a kingdom. It's going to be a kingdom where the whoremongers and even it says the dogs, the whoremongers, the licentious, it says the homosexuals, they will be pushed out of the kingdom. So you have to, as a Christian, if you're honest to the scripture, you have to believe in a kingdom. You can't say that democracy is the final formulation of the ideal world. And of course, Father said that all the time. All the time. So this is what happens in the reality of democracies. They do not last, and they cannot last, because at some point you will have mob rule, and at some point the majority will decide to destroy the rights of the minority. So he goes into a whole discussion, which I found quite well done, about logos, okay? How Western civilization is founded on logos, which is interesting, because here we have in the Bible, we have the idea, of course, in Genesis, of man and woman being made in the image of God. Okay, man and woman being made in the image of God. Okay, so there are differences, obviously, but they are made in the image of God. That means, he was saying, that's an incredibly crazy thing to say, not about man and woman, but just that all human beings all human beings have an element of divinity within them. That's a totally bonkers idea to come into existence like 5,000 years ago. It's totally crazy. Because when you look at the history of humanity, you see a lot of tribalism. You see a lot of, in that tribalism, you see a lot of that binary dialectic, where it's sort of us versus them and all this kind of thing. And in the Judeo-Christian culture, whether believers or not, they're still human beings made in the image of God, you see? Even if they're a criminal, they're still human beings made in the image of God. So that's like in the ancient world, that's such a incredible statement. Because look at for example, Hindu caste system. Not all human beings are the same. They're not all made in the image of God. There's untouchables, there's ones that are worse than animals, right, etc. So this is not consistent throughout culture and time. Look at the Egyptian. You had this huge slave class. You had the huge god class and the pharaohs, etc. Whatever civilization you look at, you have that, system that basically incorporates political Satanism, some form of feudalism, socialism, communism, etc. Which then leads to the larger principles of a super elite class or a gifted enlightened class, you see, that is supposed to rule over and centrally plan over everybody. And this is the common, consistent trend throughout, whether you look at religions and or you look at body politics. Very fascinating stuff. But you have in the Judeo-Christian world, and we're so spoiled because it's just part of our culture, you have the idea, number one, that God created man and woman in the image of God. And look at this. Number two, in John 1:1, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. That's a very interesting concept, the idea of logos. Logos, or the Word, it's a crazy concept, if you think about it. It's pretty crazy. You're saying that in the beginning with the mighty Creator, was a Word, and of course, in Christian context, that's represented as Jesus Christ, as it comes to the earth. The Word of God then becomes flesh. And you see, look at this, the Word was with God, and the Word was God. The Word was with God and was God. So there's so much power invested into logos. So when you look at the history of humanity, you're going to see two main choices for how to deal with issues, okay? One is with the sword, the next one is with words. So whether a civilization is going to decide how are they going to solve problems which human beings will always have. There's always going to be some conflicts, there's always going to be some disagreements, right? It doesn't matter, even though all the saints are gathered here, sometimes we all have disagreements, right? That's human beings. Okay? But how do we solve those issues? Do we solve those issues by the sword, or do we solve those issues by the Word? Isn't that interesting? So what will be the foundational aspect of society which will allow for peace? That is, we're not killing each other. That is, what will be the foundational aspect for peace to exist? And for Western civilization, it's rationale. It's been sort of rationale. Where does that come from, though? It comes from this foundation of everything being based on the Word. Everything. God Himself is based on logos. That there's something above all of us that transcends all of us and that we're all beholden to. Yet we also have this ability to express our thoughts and our ideas and our plans. And then by debate or discussion, whatever, we can then we can put them out into the atmosphere, and then people can decide based on words, right? Based on words, not right equals might. Not I gather all the power and then I kill everybody who's against me, and then that's what makes me right. You see what I'm saying? Which is how Genghis Khan did it, which is how the Chinese emperors did it, which is how the sultans of Arabia and Islam did it. You name it. Okay? We're talking about a fundamental difference when you're looking at God as the Word. He becomes everything, then is undergirded, underlying everything in the cosmos and the universe is logos, is this verbalization of cognitive thinking. articulated patterns of speech, which then manifest reality. You see what I'm saying? Things that were in God's mind, things that were with God and in his intelligent cosmic mind, okay, and then are articulated, and then comes into existence the mountains and the rivers and the waters, you name it. Isn't that interesting? So in the same way that we, in the image of God, we can see something, we can say, for example, in the future, in 3 to 5 years, I want to be in this realm. You know, I want to do this and that goal. I want to do this and that mission, whatever it is, you know, whatever. I have this plan or this dream, whatever it is, right? And I have this 3 to 5 years. That's what I want to do. That will be what I call my land of milk and honey. And I'm not saying don't get like, what is it, pagan about it, you know what I'm saying? But how we can look 3 to 5 years in the future, we can use our imagination and cognitive ability to imagine that through imagination and allowing the mind to take the dangerous roads. For example, if I'm climbing down that cliff, which I see right now, what would happen to me? I would fall off and fall at the speed of gravity, and I would splat on the ground like a big egg that's going to crack on the floor, right? So your mind can see that, and in your mind, your imaginative you dies, so that you in reality don't have to die. You see what I'm saying? And that's a great survival mechanism that human beings can imagine what's going to happen to us. We can imagine falling off the cliff and splatting like an egg, and that prevents us from actually having to do it to learn it. You see what I'm saying? So there's power of the mind then to articulate, to formulate thoughts, and then to articulate it into verbal language, which then impacts other minds, right? This power that then impacts other minds. This power of this logos undergirds everything in the Christian realm. In the Judeo-Christian realm, it is the words, the logos, it's not only with God, it is God. Isn't it interesting? That's why the Constitution in the West is so important. It's a whole bunch of words. Everybody's beholden to this Constitution. Everybody from the President of the United States to the, to the most humble man. Everybody's beholden to, they're supposed to be, okay? I know it's not really the case, but with the political class, etc. But it's supposed to be, in theory, it's supposed to be that everybody is subservient to the logos, or the word, that binds us and holds us and connects us all together in unity, at least to some basic civilization. Isn't that interesting? So the fundamental, this is such a unique aspect that God, the intelligent personal creator, the intelligent mind that creates all the constants and conditions in the universe to actually create the ability for the universe to have life, right? All that is not just in his mind. It's not just in his mind. There is a word there, and that word then projects out of the mind and moves into action and then creates and manifests reality. Isn't that incredible? Isn't that interesting? So the fundamental preeminence of logos, or the word, is actually part of the core of the debate tradition, for example, or battling of the minds, for example. Instead of just battling might equals right and who has a bigger army, etc., it's battling with the mind, which is supposed to be the framework of, democracy or a republic, right? We don't just go and kill people if we disagree with them. There's due process, there's jurisprudence, right? The fundamental aspect of American jurisprudence, for example, or even criminal law, is what? The person is, there's something within every human being, no matter, even if the whole world, the whole majority says, this person's evil, he needs to be killed. That we say, no, there's something fundamental there that he's innocent till proven guilty. Show me he's bad. Make your argument that he's bad. Show the evidence that he or she is a criminal or bad. Innocent till proven guilty. It's the foundation of a civilization that views every human being as made in the image of God. Even though he turned into that kind of, we have to create our own values type thinker, he did warn. He was greatly in despair about the fact that when we remove the fundamental foundational structure of meaning, that is, quote, the God ideal, so to speak, from Christianity, and we take that from under the rug, he believed that we're not going to become all rationalists, we're not going to all become, scientists and everything. It's going to create absolute havoc. And he predicted in the 20th century, you're going to have hundreds of millions going to be killed because they're going to take on, as you get rid of God, you have to replace it. You have to replace it with something else, and pathological, psychopathic ideologies will come in and take its place. We'll create some subculture of meaning. We'll create some subculture of group identity. We'll create a hierarchy, etc., all those kind of things, and then we'll massacre millions of people. And that's what happened. It's exactly what happened. He prophesied it. Nietzsche prophesied this in the 1800s, late 1800s. This fundamental foundational structure of Western civilization, or rational discourse, when it's replaced, it's going to be replaced by nihilism, this great despair. Nothing is meaningful. Nothing has meaning. We're just floating on a big rock. We're apes. We're just advanced apes floating on a big rock. Nothing has meaning. Whatever we do is meaningless. And then, of course, you should ask that person, was that a meaningful statement? The statement you just said, was that a meaningful statement? Am I supposed to believe it? Am I supposed to take you seriously? Am I supposed to? You see? Because they're just stating something that they believe is meaningful, but yet they say nothing is meaningful. So it's this endless cycle of despair, which then, of course, will create tremendous pain, angst, and spiritual, frustration, and, of course, suicide, etc. So it will either be replaced by nihilism, or on one extreme, or on the other extreme, radical ideologies, pathological, psychopathic ideologies that focus on power. Power. Ends justify the means. Marx. Ends justify the means. Marx. Religion is the opium of the masses. Right? Then, of course, it's then replaced, the foundational structure is replaced by this, and then you have this kind of new formulation of an ideology that's actually more like a cult and more like a religion. And of course, that is actually seeking to control state, centralize power, and get all the guns to themselves, to disarm the population so they can do whatever they want. So he refers to this whole, this metaphysical, fundamental, foundational structure, in his view, as like the God ideal, okay, the Judeo-Christian God ideal, okay, of this logos and of this incredible intelligence and wise being that creates this incredible universe that we reside in. Okay, so he refers to that like that. And of course, he refers to it in these Jungian metaphors, like dreams. Like he calls that the dream state. I mean, it's kind of a pejorative, But anyways, that's how he's looking at it, okay? In like what he calls the dream state or the dream realm. And you remove all that, and then you get, in a huge vacuum, you get either this great despair of Western civilization, which happened, right? Women were taught, you got to go into the workplace. You're defined by your work, and work makes you valuable, and what kind of job you have is what gives you value. No, you don't have value if you're maternal, or you're a mom, or you're a housewife. Those are all pathetic, traditional slave roles. You're only valuable if you work. You're only valuable if you're in a big company. You're only valuable if you're a manager. You're only valuable if you make as much as the guys. But what happens statistically, women are now depressed. They're not as happy. Because their minds are not hardwired to be fighting all the time, and not hardwired to be cold and to be non-emotional. They're not hardwired that way. They're hardwired around the fireplace and tending to the children while and being if they were pregnant. You can see that in the tribes, they're around the fire, and the men are going hunting and doing dangerous things to gather resources for their wives. So when we get rid of the fundamental Judeo-Christian cosmological framework that undergirds our jurisprudence system, our way we see, pursuing logic and rationale and evidence. This, of course, then helps create a hierarchy of competence rather than a hierarchy of tyranny. Right? Because in sociological studies, high IQ is directly correlated with, for example, income and how much one can make. Where you have a free and responsible nation, well, you're going to have the best place for those people who are participating in the Pareto principle, that square root percentage that's creating 50% of the wealth. They're going to want to stay in that nation because they're not being robbed, they're not being forcefully, taxed, etc. You name it, right? That's going to create wealth for everybody, and that's why it says, when the ocean rises, sea level rises, all the boats rise. Big boats, small boats, doesn't matter. All the boats rise. But the whole trope of Marxism and communism is this malevolent victimhood that, oh, look at them, they produce more than you. It's because they're stealing from you. Give me power, so I'll use a state, and I will take what they have and give back to you because it's really yours. You see, this is the lie of socialism and communism. And young people fall right into it. It's like the temptation with a snake. Right? And that's why you see democracies always collapse. About 300 years is a time frame, so historically. It collapses because the majority will rule at some point. When the majority rule, the minorities are dead. The thing about a republic is that a minority has rights that the majority cannot erase. That's why America was a republic. We were not a democracy. A republic being categorized as the minority will be protected from the majority. Why? Because the founding fathers who found America, they were always the minority. Here, the Quakers and all these different sects of Christianity were punished by the Catholic Church and said, you're heretics, Just like they say about, just like they say about me. That don't bother me. But no Christian trying to come and kill us. Right? So human beings need purpose. We are hardwired because we're made in the image of God. We want purpose. God has a purpose. We need something that extends beyond our temporary pleasures and our temporary fulfillment of desire in the hierarchy of needs. We need something more than that. We need something more than that. They found studies, he was mentioning studies that show anything above basic income level, that is basically about lower middle class level in the Western world. Any more money you accrue than that, so above what, $30,000, $40,000, anything above that, does not get rid of any of your problems. So he does the studies where he has super rich people and middle class, lower middle class people, same divorce rates, same strife between parents and children, same disease, same illness, suffering, etc. Money does not solve it. And of course, the leftists are always railing on capitalism and saying, oh, free markets are all about money, when they are hyper-focused on money. Everything for them is money, 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 power, power, money, 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 right? Take more. What's the solution to increase poverty? Well, more money, more money to federal programs, right? What's the solution to reducing crime? More money to the federal programs. What's the solution to dropout rates? More money to federal programs. It's the same. It's like this hyper cultish lust for more money, state, of course, which is stolen from the population, forcefully, at the end of a barrel. So you have other psychologists and thinkers that have, of course, greatly influenced the modern Western world and the state of affairs, our psychological, spiritual condition that we're in now. And you have Jung. You have Carl Jung, who was also a student of Nietzsche. You have Freud, who was also a student of Nietzsche, influenced greatly by that. And Jung was talking about humans living in like a dream, a mythological, epic dream. Okay? And also Freud talked about this with the unconscious mind. This idea that we're loosely unified subpersonalities. Isn't that crazy? loosely unified sub-personalities. So we're a combination. We're a combination of all these different personalities, which is like loosely unified by some mechanism, okay? But Jung disagreed with Nietzsche, who said that we could create our own values. Nietzsche believed that as we get rid of God, we are going to have to collectively decide what is right and wrong, decide what is morality. And I've talked about this, for example, in why I left Buddhism. Because the highest Anuttara Samyak Sambodhi realm of enlightenment that they claim, you are going to transcend good and evil, which means you will determine what is good and evil, which means you are becoming Satan. Good and evil is not going to be determined by you as a human being. No way. I don't care if you're a Buddha or it doesn't matter. You're not going to be able to determine good and evil. You do that, you're going to become Hitler. Right? God, his nature is what determines what is good and what is evil. God is truth, so he's not liar. He's not a liar. Right? God is a sustainer. He's not a thief. How would I say? He's honest. He's honest. He has character, so he's not a stealer. A thief? Right? So Jung disagreed with Nietzsche, who said that we have to be able to eventually create our own values and become the Uberman. That means Superman. That's a dangerous ideology. You see, all the pagan ideologies lead to that in the end, folks. There's really only two paths. That's why Jesus said, I'm the way, the truth, and life. It's Jesus and all the other roads, which lead to the same mountain, Uberman. But Jung disagreed with Nietzsche, and he said, if we do that, we're going to create tremendous calamity. And that's exactly what happened. Humans are deeply affected by things beyond their conscious control. Isn't that interesting? This whole idea of the subconscious, that we're basically ruled by things beyond our control. Think about that. The fact that these sub-personalities rule you without your conscious control. And that you're constantly fighting and in war with and trying to come to grips with. And there's other formulations how to deal with that, right? You can meditate on the present moment. You can do this or that, whatever it is, to get away from that insanity. But the fact that we're controlled by something out of our control. This is a remarkable statement. There's things within our personality, traditionally we will call them angels or demons, the warring states between the mind or in our spirit, the temptations of Satan, etc. Even Jung realized that we are dealing with all these demons. That the nature of human nature is not some utopia and you're always happy all the time. Every human being experiences suffering. All of us are self-centered and malevolent, actually lean towards malevolence, not goodness. Especially when we take out the Judeo-Christian culture and there's this vacuum of nihilism. What's the purpose of doing good? There's no purpose. We all going to die anyways. It's about as relevant as telling a male lion not to have sex with multiple female lions. Or forcibly, yes, basically rape them, right? It's about as relevant as that. If you believe in evolutionary biology and that mythology. Humans are deeply affected by things beyond our conscious control. In a Christian realm, we would say there's a whole spiritual realm that we don't see. Okay? There's spirits. There's demons. Jesus, 33% of his ministry was casting out devils. Casting out devils. We are deeply affected by things beyond our conscious control. And then he goes into this whole idea of dreams and myths. This is interesting. Dreams, look at this, like thinking, are attempts to formulate something in the realm of uncertainty. Thinking is trying to formulate something out of uncertainty, right? Like, where does the thought come from? You have a thought, it emerges in your mind, but where does it come from? Are you sure it comes from you? Where does it come from? What personality? Which sub-personality? Where from that sub-personality? Where does that thought emerge? Where does it come and dominate your gray matter? Isn't that interesting? How does it take over your, wrinkly gray brain? How does that happen? How does a thought come and take it over and totally perplex it or keep its attention? How does that happen? In the same way, dreams, like thinking, they are like attempts coming up, bubbling. Freud would talk about bubbling up from like the unconscious mind. Things that are out of our control. We're not producing these thoughts. There's many people who interpret dreams, or not interpret dreams, but say about dreams that, they're just like memories, or they're just like replays of things. But many times dreams have very coherent structure, very clear pathways in which you're going. Sometimes you can participate in the dream. Many times there's a beginning and an end. I'm not saying all the time, but sometimes there are. Sometimes it's very coherent, very structured. I had a lot of dreams just last night, and I was while I'm in the dream, I'm saying, God, what do you want me to learn from this dream? I knew I was in a dream, and I could say inside the dream, God, what would you like me to learn from this dream? Right? There are many in the Bible we talk about them as God sometimes give revelation, future events, seeing what can happen, warnings, right? Jung talked about dreams as like the birthplace of thought, that our thinking and our ability to formulate thoughts came from not the waking state, but the sleeping state. That our dreams actually stimulated human thinking, and dreams stimulated human exploration of their mind, these visions and imaginations they could have. Isn't that interesting? And we do see in the Bible. We see in the Bible God uses dreams. How many people in their dreams encounter God? Right? Yeah, see, a lot of people. So Father told us to write autobiographies. Remember this? He commanded each one of us to write autobiographies. As kings and queens of the kingdom of God, co-heirs with Christ, your story matters. Big time it matters. And it's the devil that says your story doesn't matter, especially when you're one of the saints. Your story doesn't matter, but it does matter. Because human beings are stories. We're not just flesh and blood. We're stories. As the quote, modern person gave up their relationship with God, they gave up their story. Which is a reason why they're always trying to recreate a new story in their own image, which of course leads them to more suffering and mischief and malevolence. And it's interesting because some of these atheistic professors are now turning theistic, are saying, hey, we've been too mean to Christianity after 50 years of Christian abuse. I mean, abusing Christians. So this week, of course, as you know, they deposed me. And I was doing a deposition this week, like 10 and a half freaking hours. My goodness, give me a break. We went in at like 9 and got out at 7:30. It's ridiculous. But, anyways, you could see they're trying to set their own narratives so they can win the case and steal money. But it's all about setting their narrative, the Kwak group, True Father was senile, and that's why we stole his money, see? We did it for him. Etc. we changed the boards, and we went against Father's orders. And, right after, I became the international president and Father crowned me 3 times. Oh, then, of course, all these things start happening. And then legally, they're trying to take away all the, the UCI name and any connection to the Unification Church, et cetera. Oh, yes, of course. They're trying to make the story. Father's crazy. He's senile. He's nuts. Oh, didn't Reverend Moon also smack you in the face in front of people? Yeah, so what? He's my daddy. He can smack me. Just like the God can smack me anytime he wants. I ain't got no problem with that. Oh, and that has to be during the episode. Didn't Reverend Moon disrobe in front of the people? I said, my father was teaching about the Garden of Eden. And he was saying that in the Garden of Eden, there's no shame. And he was 92 years old. He's not trying to do some strip tease in front of people. He's talking about the Garden of Eden. Do you understand it? He's saying, I have no shame. As your grandfather, I have no shame, you dumb idiots. That's what he was saying to us. And you are trying to write a different story. But I was there, you bozos. It's about creating that story, taking the story away, taking the story of God's fight from the beginning to have his children be his children and not Satan's children. Taking the story of human responsibility away and saying, oh, it's victimhood. And the Savior is not Jesus, is not God, it's Lucifer. So he also discussed an interesting thing, that the decline of prayer in the Western world is caustic, it's corrosive, it's destructive. Now there's no more prayer. Prayer is going down in the Western world. Of course, now you see with Generation Z, the young generation is like 80-year-old, 10-year-old kids, they're now becoming very conservative. Right? Just like the kids in the 60s, their parents were very conservative Christians, and then they become devil worshippers. But now the devil worshippers took over, and they're running the public schools and running all the things and censoring you on Google, and you can't have any free speech, you can't have any free thought. And now the Generation Z is saying, I don't want to be no devil worshiper, I'll be a Christian to make you all angry. I'm going to accept Jesus Christ to make you all angry. Stop telling me to worship Satan. I'm going to worship Jesus. Just to piss you off. So the lack of prayer in our culture has deeply harmed the civilizational psyche, spirit, our psychology, our makeup. It has harmed us because we have no more time to get away. And even though you try to take a vacation, you're still bombarded by advertising and marketing and whatever it is. You're just endlessly bombarded. There's no time. There is plenty of time, but it's made to seem as if there's no time to spend time with the timeless. With the timeless creator, who's not an impersonal metaphysical cosmos. He is a personal being who loves us and wants to deal with us and knows all our flaws and sins and wants us to turn to him. We're a combination of so many forces, spiritual, psychological, mental, emotional, intellectual, will, etc. Also other extra personal influences, home, family, co-workers, demons, angels, spirits. But we are often self-centered and malevolent and experience, obviously, and everybody will experience suffering and pain in life. It's hard for a nihilist to be serious when they experience pain. Because pain confronts you with so much realism and sensory overload that you can't deny that you are alive. And that's why God allows us to experience pain in our life. He's not going to take it all away. The Bible says not pain, it's not going to go away. He said that he'll wipe away the tears from your eyes. He didn't say he'd take away all the pain. So that, of course, God allows us to experience pain so that we can find the reality of that we are, and not get deluded thinking we don't exist. We can experience that we exist And when we experience we exist, we're going to ask the questions, why am I existing? That's called existential questions. When you experience pain, you exist, and then you're going to ask the question, why do I exist? That's an existential question. And that's going to lead you, if you keep probing it towards truth, it's going to lead you eventually to God. Even though you go through science, like all these scientists who are now becoming theists. With something greater, but it fails. God allows us to experience suffering pain. It's good for us because we're going to find that we exist. And no matter how much you try to run away from your suffering and pain, you're going to still find it's there. You're just going to find that all the temporary fixes and all the drugs and all the sex and all the alcohol won't do it. It won't do it. You're still going to feel terrible and cruddy and dirty and homeless. And when you finally realize that you do exist and you're not in a nihilistic vacuum or universe, that you do have a purpose and you're not a freaking advanced primate, you realize, oh my gosh, why do I exist? If there's a creator, am I a child of God? You're going to start asking the question. You start searching. You start asking the existential questions. The beginning of the search for truth. And if you're honest and noble about it, you will discover that there is one way, truth, and life. And his name is Jesus Christ. He's a different type of God. Not all gods are the same. He is a fundamentally different type of God. And if you appreciate anything about the freedom and sovereignty that you can experience in the modern day in America or free countries, you better thank Jesus. Because it's from that civilization where it comes from. All what we talked about, from the logos to the fundamental core of jurisprudence, to the fundamental core of the equality of man and woman before God. I mean, where do you get this from? You don't get that from other gods. Judeo-Christian values. Men and women equal before God in value, in love. Different roles, but equal in value and love. Prayer lets us get back to foundational meaning, purpose in God, our relationship with Christ, purpose in God, relationship with Christ, foundational meaning, purpose, relationship. It allows us to get back to our fundamental relationship that unites us beyond time and space, across time and across dimensions, into that which started it all. You get connected to the epic story that is God's story when you have a relationship with the Bible. Your story becomes a part of God's story. You become part of the 144. 1,000. You become a part of the chosen people. You became a part of divine providence. You become a part of God's epic story throughout time. And you have tremendous meaning and value. But God doesn't say you're perfect. We're saved in our sins because of the great sacrifice of Christ. Not of our own doing, but because he loved us. And so thus we also have humility, and we have patience and forbearance for other people. We still speak the truth. We still challenge and stand up against unrighteousness. But we have a fundamental love for humanity. Strength, mind, heart, and soul. And love your neighbor. As you love yourself, love your neighbor. That's what Peace Police Militia is all about. It's not trying to look badass with the AR-15s. It's about being good people who are ready to defend good people against evil. And that's what any kingdom and any nation that truly loves God and loves its people should do. Prayer, folks, prayer. Chun Seung Young 93, the purpose of our creation is love, Father says. Life was created based on God's love. God did not generate love by first creating life. In other words, life began because love started budding in God's heart. Since life started from love, the result must also be produced through love. Since the beginning was love, the end must also be love. This is why human beings are miserable when love is taken away. And that's why when God's kingdom comes, it is the greatest sign of his love. The greatest sign. It's something that we don't deserve. It's something that we didn't earn, but it's something that he bestows upon us to live with him in the millennial kingdom. That is a tremendous gift, and it's a gift that goes back to our first scripture today. It's a gift of grace of the unmovable kingdom that we have been given. Woo! Chaniguk is coming to this world.